those 7 MPs who've been kicked out now have a choice. They can shut up for 6 months, come back and basically give up their politics and whatever protest they want to make as the price of remaining a Labour MP. And lots of Labour lefties are very sentimental about the Labour Party, even if they disagree with it the entire time. Or some of them, I hear, and some unions are looking to the success of independents like Jeremy Corbyn, like the 4 Gaza independents who won in Birmingham and Dewsbury and other places, and thinking, well, hang on, there is clearly an electoral market for our politics. Why don't we start something new?
You've written today about the 7 Labour MPs, Corbynites, who had the whip withdrawn this week for supporting an amendment to remove the 2-child benefit cap, Patrick. I just wonder, will they split? Will they come back after 6 months, do you think, and just rejoin Labour? Probably not too much of a problem for Keir Starmer, or maybe you think they will be?
Well, that is the question. That's the crucial question, Peter. What do these 7 Labour MPs do? Because we've seen in this Parliament, unusually by historical standards, there are 5 left-leaning independent MPs, 4 Greens, and also by historical standards, it is unprecedented for a Labour leader to have kicked this many MPs out of his party on an issue of domestic policy in the past.
And very soon.
Yeah, and so quickly after coming to government. So I think it's clear both sides now of Labour's factional war, the government and the left, are very clear that this government is going to be a pretty cold house for Corbynism. Now, that has given Corbynite MPs a choice. You either fall into line or, as the 7 MPs did on Tuesday night, you stick to your guns and you take the punishment. Those 7 MPs who've been kicked out now have a choice. They can shut up for 6 months, come back and basically give up their politics and whatever protest they want to make as the price of remaining a Labour MP. And lots of Labour lefties are very sentimental about the Labour Party, even if they disagree with it the entire time. Or some of them, I hear, and some unions are looking to the success of independents like Jeremy Corbyn, like the 4 Gaza independents who won in Birmingham and Dewsbury and other places, and thinking, well, hang on, there is clearly an electoral market for our politics. Why don't we start something new?
Are we honestly in a situation where John McDonnell, Rebecca Long-Bailey could leave the Labour Party to start a new party? Or even a grouping of some description?
Well, look, ultimately the choice may be taken out of their hands. That's the difficult thing for them. John McDonnell is not the sort of person who's going to smile politely and ask politely to be taken back into the Labour Party. You've heard that from some of his statements. You've heard that from Upsana Begum, the Labour MP, or the now newly minted independent MP for Poplar and Limehouse, who said she was blackmailed by Labour whips. You hear it from Zara Sultana, very telegenic and articulate MP for Coventry South, who's called Keir Starmer authoritarian for kicking her out of the party. These are MPs who ultimately need their credibility on the broader left and can now see, this is the thing that's changed, they can now see there is an electoral market under first past the post for a politics of the left. Now, it's maybe isolated in a number of cities, a number of places, a number of seats of a certain kind, but that has changed the calculus. Advisors to Jeremy Corbyn, who I speak to, were always of the view that maybe after the next election, i.e. the election we've just had, there might be a market for a new party of the left. They feel vindicated in that view by the results, by Jeremy Corbyn's victory in Islington North, and they are now thinking seriously about whether they need to bite their tongues and stay in the Labour Party or set up something new.
Are they taking any inspiration on the right from Reform UK, given that they broke through at this election?
I think that is the other side of the coin. You know, you have parties of the left and right, the radical left and the radical right in Reform and the Greens and these independents breaking through. And you'll know, Peter, you know, it was always thought that ultimately challenger parties, disruptor parties could never succeed under first past the post. But something has clearly changed in our electoral system, in the nature of the electorate in certain places, that means they are willing to give other parties a go. And that is what some of those Labour MPs who were kicked out on Tuesday, some of their allies in the unions are now thinking about.
Well, Patrick writes about this in the Times today. Can I just ask you one quick thing before you go, Patrick, just in regard to the 19 billion black hole, what you think Rachel Reeves will probably say on Monday?
I think she will say, we've opened the books, it's worse than we imagined. Don't mention the fact that you can find this 20 billion figure in OBR papers from a few months ago. It's really, really bad. The Tories have trashed the economy. Other ministers will be saying similar things that morning about other things, as we heard from Wes Streeting on the Care Quality Commission this morning. And, it will be her George Osborne moment. I wrote about that in the Times a couple of weeks ago. That's the strategy. Just look at what George Osborne said in his emergency budget in 2010, and imagine it in Rachel Reeves's South London accent. And I think you've
slightly different from George Osborne's clipped tones.
St Paul's boys tones. Yeah.
Rachel Reeves making a big "it's worse than we thought" speech on Monday. How much worse is it than she thought?
£20 billion worse is the short answer. Now, you can debate the extent to which Labour didn't know any of this. What Tories will tell you is that this was all in the Treasury's Red Book. There's a very similar figure in the OBR's recent projections of the public finances. When I speak to government ministers, sources in number 10 and 11, they tell me actually what we found is there are lots of things, particularly on the funding of public services, that are running over budget and over budget that haven't necessarily been picked up by those projections. So we will see the detail on Monday, but we will basically see, as I wrote in the Times a couple of weeks ago, Rachel Reeves play George Osborne and say our inheritance is dreadful and this is going to inform every decision we have to take. And if those decisions are unpopular or they sound unpalatable, well, I'm afraid it's the fault of the Conservative Party.
But is this plausible, given that in the run-up to the election, lots of independent observers, not most notably the Institute of Fiscal Studies, pointed out there was a black hole in everyone's finances?
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's the difficulty. And Rachel Reeves herself said a week or so before the election, the notion of getting inside and opening the books was itself a bit of an anachronism because we have the OBR now, because we have very extensive independent forecasts from the likes of the IFS. And she said, we already know what the public finances say. It'll be interesting to see how she finesses that on Monday. I think she will have to set out what she didn't know from those projections, from the OBR, from the IFS, and that, I understand from my conversations with people at the top of government this week, is what she's likely to do. She'll say, we knew the broad picture, but we found very, very scary details that, Paul Johnson couldn't possibly tell us.
Thanks, Patrick. Times Radio senior political correspondent Patrick Maguire off to finish lodging the complaint with the delivery people. Patrick organised some wine to be delivered to my house and the bottles are smashed, so he's got off to lodge a complaint. Let me keep you up to date on how that goes, Patrick.